The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, though such Earth measurements meant nothing to the beings who sent it. Diane stood at the viewing window of humanity's first orbital station, watching the alien vessel approach. It was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. All flowing curves and light that seemed to bend around its hull like water. "They're here," Hannah said behind him, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. She had studied alien biology for 15 years, preparing for this moment. Now that it was happening, all her training felt inadequate. The Galactic Assembly had been watching Earth for 50 years. They observed from a distance, never interfering, never making contact. Humanity knew they were there. Everyone knew. The world had spent half a century preparing for this day, wondering when the invitation would come. If it would come, now it had. Taeyang walked onto the observation deck, his captain's uniform crisp and perfect. He had commanded the station for 3 years, keeping it running, keeping humanity's first true outpost in space operational. "All departments report ready," he said. "Ambassador Doyen, they're requesting permission to dock." Doyen nodded. "Granted." The alien ship connected to the station with barely a whisper of sound. The docking clamps engaged, and within minutes, the welcoming committee was aboard. There were 5 of them, each from a different species. They walked upright like humans, but that was where the similarities ended. One had skin that shifted colors like oil on water. Another stood nearly 3 meters tall with 4 arms. A third had eyes that covered half its face. The one who spoke had translator implants that made its words sound almost human. "Greetings from the Galactic Assembly. We are honored to finally meet humanity directly." The formal reception took place in the station's largest conference room. Dayun sat across from the aliens, Hannah and Taeyang on either side of him. The walls displayed Earth below, blue and green and beautiful. "We have observed your species for some time," the lead alien said. Its name was unpronounceable, so it told them to call it Ambassador Kelron. "You have reached the necessary technological threshold. You have achieved space travel, quantum communication, and fusion power. You have unified your world under a single governing body. You meet all requirements for membership in the Galactic Assembly." Hannah leaned forward slightly. "How many species are in the Assembly?" 847, Kelron replied. "Across 4 spiral arms of this galaxy. We have maintained peace and prosperity for 12,000 of your years." 12,000 years. Dayun tried to wrap his mind around that number. Human civilization was barely 5,000 years old. These beings had been working together since before humanity invented writing. "That's remarkable," Taeyang said. "How you maintain peace across so many different species." "Common purpose," another alien answered. This one had a voice like wind through leaves. "Common law. Common understanding. All species who join agree to follow assembly protocols. In return, they receive protection, trade, technology sharing, and cultural exchange." It sounded perfect. Too perfect. Doyen had spent 20 years as a crisis negotiator before becoming Earth's first ambassador to alien species. He had talked down terrorists, brokered peace between warring nations, and mediated corporate disputes worth billions. He had learned to listen not just to what people said, but to what they didn't say. "What happens if we refuse membership?" Diane asked. The room went silent. The 5 aliens looked at each other. It was subtle, just a glance, but Doyen caught it. Hannah noticed too. He saw her eyes narrow slightly. Kelron's color shifted to something darker. "Refuse? I do not understand the question." "If humanity decides not to join the Galactic Assembly," Doyen explained, keeping his voice calm and friendly, "what happens then?" "But why would you refuse?" Another alien asked, genuine confusion in its translated voice. "The benefits are substantial. The alternative is isolation. I'm not saying we will refuse, Doyen said. I'm asking what happens if we do. It's a theoretical question. Kelron's colors shifted again, cycling through patterns that might have been the alien equivalent of discomfort. No species has ever refused assembly membership. Not in 12,000 years. Once a civilization reaches the threshold, they join. It is the natural progression. But theoretically, Doyen pressed gently, if a species did refuse, they would remain outside the assembly, Kelron said after a long pause. They would not have access to assembly trade networks, technology sharing, or protection. Protection from what? Tai Yang asked. Another pause. Longer this time. The galaxy can be dangerous, Kelron said finally. There are hazards, phenomena. The assembly helps member species navigate these dangers. Diane made a mental note. That wasn't the real answer. He filed it away for later consideration. The meeting continued for several more hours. The aliens explained the benefits of membership, the requirements, the protocols. Everything was structured, organized, efficient. They showed images of assembly worlds, of great cities that spanned continents, of ships that could cross the galaxy in weeks. They explained that humanity would have a trial period. 6 months to integrate, to learn, to adjust. After that, there would be a final vote. If Earth chose to proceed, the membership would become permanent. And if we choose not to proceed after the trial period? Doyen asked. Kelron's colors went very still. That has also never happened. As the meeting concluded and the aliens prepared to return to their ship, Hana pulled Doyen aside. Did you notice? She whispered. Notice what? They never actually answered your question. Either time. Doyen nodded. He had noticed after the alien ship departed. Doyen, Hana, and Tai Yang remained in the conference room. They watched Earth turn slowly below them, so fragile and small in the vastness of space. What do you think? Tai Yang asked. Doyen was quiet for a long moment. I think, he said slowly, that in 12,000 years, across 847 species, not one has ever asked them what happens if they refuse. Not one has ever turned down membership after the trial period. Not one. Maybe the offer really is that good, Hana suggested, but her voice held out. Maybe, Doyen agreed. Or maybe there's a reason no one has ever said no. You're suspicious, Tai Yang observed. I'm cautious, Doyen corrected. There's a difference. He turned from the window to face them both. We're going to accept the trial membership. Earth's government will vote tomorrow, but the decision is already made. We can't pass up this opportunity, but Hana prompted. But we're going to spend the next 6 months asking questions. Real questions. Hard questions. We're going to look at everything they show us and ask ourselves what they're not showing us. We're going to be the first species in 12,000 years to actually examine this offer instead of just accepting it. Tai Yang smiled grimly. They're not going to like that. No, Doyen agreed. They're not. But I didn't become ambassador to make aliens happy. I became ambassador to protect humanity's interests. Below them, Earth continued its eternal rotation, unaware that its people had just taken their first real step into a galaxy much stranger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The Galactic Assembly had extended their hand in welcome, smiling and friendly and offering everything humanity could want. Doyen had asked a simple question. What if we say no? The fact that no one had ever asked it before should have been the first warning. The fact that the aliens couldn't answer it should have been the second. But humanity had always been good at ignoring warnings. They were about to find out if that was a strength or a fatal flaw. 6 months passed quickly. Too quickly, Yuna thought as she reviewed the trade agreements for the 3rd time. Something was wrong with them, but she couldn't quite identify what. The numbers all worked out. The terms seemed fair. Every species got equal access to resources and markets. That was the problem. They were too equal. Yuna had spent 15 years in international trade before taking this position. She knew how negotiations worked. There were always winners and losers, always someone who got a slightly better deal. But the Assembly's trade system had no variance at all. Every species paid the same rates, received the same benefits, followed the same rules. It was perfect. And perfection made her nervous. Found anything? Minho asked, entering her office aboard the orbital station. He carried a datapad covered in military assessments and defense protocols. Nothing concrete, Yuna admitted. Just a feeling, you? Minho set down his datapad with more force than necessary. The Assembly has the largest military fleet in the galaxy. Thousands of ships. Weapons that could sterilize a planet in hours. Defensive capabilities we can't even fully understand. That sounds like a good thing, Yuna said carefully. Protection. It would be, Minho agreed, except they've never used it. Not once in recorded history. Never? But you said they've existed for 12,000 years. Exactly. 12,000 years, and their fleet has never fought an external enemy. No alien invasions. No galactic threats. No wars with species outside the Assembly. Yuna frowned. Then what do they use the fleet for? Minho's expression went dark. Internal peacekeeping. They call it pacification. When a member species develops technology that violates Assembly protocols, the fleet shows up. The species is given a choice. Destroy the technology or be destroyed themselves. Has any species ever refused? No, the fleet is too strong. Resistance would be suicide. Yuna turned back to her trade documents, seeing them in a new light. How many times has this happened? This pacification? 26 times. The most recent was 80 years ago. A species called the Torvik developed artificial intelligence beyond the permitted parameters. The fleet arrived within a week. The Torvik dismantled their AI research within a day. What are the permitted parameters? AI can handle calculations, logistics, data processing. But it can't be creative. Can't be independent. Can't make decisions outside program parameters. The Assembly says it's a safety measure. Is it? Minho shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe they just don't want member species having tools that could let them become independent. Across the station, in the Cultural Research Wing, Jiwoo was making her own discoveries. She had spent 6 months studying every piece of information the Assembly had shared about its member species. Their histories, cultures, artistic expressions, philosophical traditions. She had interviewed alien diplomats, read their literature, watched their entertainment, and she had found something impossible. Doyan, you need to see this, she said when the ambassador visited her department. Jiwoo pulled up holographic displays showing cultural data from 50 different species across 12,000 years. Look at the patterns. Every species that joins the Assembly undergoes the same cultural evolution. Within 100 years of joining, their art becomes less experimental. Their music follows standard patterns. Their literature explores approved themes. Maybe that's just natural convergence, Doyan suggested. Species learning from each other. That's what I thought too. But look at this. She expanded the timeline further back. Before joining, these species were wildly creative, diverse, unpredictable. Some were aggressive and warlike. Others were pacifistic. Some were individualistic. Others were collective. But after joining, they all become the same. Peaceful, cooperative content. Content isn't bad. No, Jiwoo agreed. But it's not natural either. Intelligent species have conflict. They disagree. They compete. That's how creativity works, how innovation happens. But Assembly species don't do that. They follow protocols. They obey rules. They never question, never rebel, never push boundaries. Diane studied the data in silence. What are you saying? I'm saying that in 12,000 years, across 847 species, not one has ever started a war after joining. Not one has ever developed forbidden technology and refused to give it up. Not one has ever left the assembly or even seriously considered it. She turned to face him. That's not peace, Doyen. That's control. That evening, the human delegation met in private. Do-Yun, Hannah, Yuna, Minho, and Ji-Woo sat around a secure conference table, their findings spread before them. We're seeing the same pattern from different angles, Do-Yun said. The assembly isn't what it appears to be. Hannah had been quiet, but now she spoke. I have something to add. Something worse. She pulled up biological data, genetic sequences, brain scans. The assembly requires all member species to undergo what they call medical compatibility adjustments. They say it's to prevent disease transmission between species, to allow safe interaction. But, Minho prompted, but the adjustments do more than that. They modify brain chemistry, reduce aggression, increase social conformity, make species more receptive to authority, and less likely to question established rules. Hannah's hand shook slightly as she zoomed in on specific genetic markers. The changes are subtle. Any individual would still feel like themselves. But across a population, over generations, it fundamentally changes who they are. They're not asking species to join, Yuna said slowly. They're asking them to submit, to give up their independence, their creativity, their free will. And no one has ever said no, Ji-Woo added, because by the time species realize what's happening, they've already been changed. They don't want to say no anymore. Diane stood and walked to the window, looking out at Earth. We have 1 week until the final membership vote. The world's governments are ready to accept. The media is celebrating. Everyone sees this as humanity's great leap forward. What are you going to do? Minho asked. Do-Yun turned back to face them. I'm going to tell them the truth. I'm going to show them what we found. And then I'm going to recommend that Earth refuse membership. They'll think you're crazy, Yuna warned. Maybe, but the data doesn't lie. The assembly won't accept refusal, Minho said. They've never had to before. We don't know how they'll react. I know, Do-Yun said quietly. But I'd rather face an angry assembly than wake up in 100 years and realize we gave away everything that makes us human. 3 days later, Do-Yun presented his findings to Earth's global parliament. The room held representatives from every nation, viewing screens filled with billions of people watching from their homes. He showed them the trade data, the military assessments, the cultural patterns, the biological modifications. He showed them what the assembly really was. This isn't an invitation to join a federation, Do-Yun concluded. It's an invitation to surrender, to become one more docile species in a galaxy that has forgotten how to be free. The assembly offers peace, prosperity, and safety. But the cost is everything we are. The debate lasted for hours. Some argued that Do-Yun was being paranoid, seeing threats where none existed. Others pointed out that humanity had fought too hard for independence to give it up now. Some suggested accepting membership but remaining vigilant. Others demanded immediate refusal. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Earth would refuse. When Do-Yun informed the assembly of Earth's decision, the alien representative showed no emotion. Calron's colors went flat and neutral. This is unprecedented, the alien said. Yes, Do-Yun agreed. You understand the consequences? You will be outside assembly protection, outside our trade networks, isolated. We understand. You will be on your own. We've been on our own for thousands of years, Do-Yun said. We'll manage. Calron stood slowly. Very well. The assembly acknowledges Earth's decision. Our ships will depart within the day. As the aliens left, Hana touched Doyen's arm. They're going to send the pacification fleet. You know that, right? I know. We can't win against them. Maybe not, Doyen said. But we can try. And that's more than 846 other species can say. Earth had made its choice. Now they would face the consequences. Earth's global parliament had never been so full. Every seat was occupied, every screen active, every eye focused on the podium where Doyen stood. Outside the building, crowds gathered in cities around the world, watching on massive displays. Humanity was about to make the most important decision in its history. SOR, Earth's Prime Minister, sat in the front row. She had been elected on a platform of unity and progress. Now she would be remembered as the leader who faced an impossible choice: submit to alien control or risk extinction. Doyen began his presentation. For 2 hours, he showed them everything. The trade patterns that made independence impossible. The military fleet that had never fought an outside enemy, only enforced compliance on its own members. The cultural homogenization that had erased diversity across 847 species. The genetic modifications that changed who people were at the most fundamental level. The assembly calls them medical compatibility adjustments, Hana explained when it was her turn to speak. They say it prevents disease, allows safe contact between species. But look at what the modifications actually do. She displayed brain scans, genetic markers, neurochemical analyses. They reduce aggression by 40%, increase social conformity by 60%, make individuals 70% more likely to accept authority without question. These changes are permanent. They pass to children, to grandchildren, forever. A representative from Asia stood. But if these modifications are so terrible, why has no species refused them? Why has no one complained? Because by the time you realize what's happened, you don't want to complain anymore, Jiwoo answered. That's the whole point. The modifications make you content with the system, happy to follow rules, unable to imagine any other way. Hyunwoo, Admiral of Earth's defensive fleet, presented the military analysis. We've studied every piece of data the Assembly shared about their peacekeeping operations. In 12,000 years, they've conducted 26 pacification missions. 26 species developed technology that violated Assembly protocols. All 26 surrendered within days of the fleet arriving. What kind of technology? Someone asked. Advanced artificial intelligence. Certain genetic modifications. Weapons systems. Faster-than-light communications that don't use assembly networks. Essentially, anything that might let a species become truly independent. Hyunwoo pulled up tactical displays. The assembly fleet is massive and powerful. If Earth refuses membership and they decide to pacify us, we cannot win in a straight fight. The chamber erupted in worried conversation. Sora let it continue for a minute, then called for order. We have heard the evidence. Now we must decide. The Assembly has given us a week to provide our final answer. I open the floor to discussion. What followed was the most intense debate in human history. Some argued that the modifications weren't so bad, that peace and prosperity were worth the cost. Others insisted that freedom was more valuable than safety. Some suggested accepting membership, but finding ways to resist the changes. Others said that was impossible, that the Assembly's control was too complete. An elderly representative from Africa stood. I survived the resource wars. I watched my country tear itself apart. I have seen what human nature can do when unchecked. Perhaps the Assembly's way is better. Perhaps we need to be modified to become more peaceful. A young woman from Europe responded. My grandmother fought in those same wars. She always said that the peace we built afterward was precious because we chose it. We worked for it. We earned it. If someone forces peace on us, if they change our brains so we can't even imagine conflict, then we're not peaceful. We're just programmed. The debate continued through the night. Arguments flew back and forth. Data was analyzed, reanalyzed, questioned, defended. Emotions ran high. Some representatives wept. Others raged. But slowly, a consensus began to form. At dawn, Sora called for a vote. "The question before this parliament is simple," she said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. "Does Earth accept full membership in the Galactic Assembly, including all requirements, protocols, and modifications? Or does Earth refuse?" Before we vote, Sora continued, "I want to share something personal. Last night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my daughter. She's 12. She plays violin badly. She argues with her teachers. She wants to be a scientist or maybe an artist. She changes her mind every week. She's stubborn and creative and difficult and wonderful." Sora's voice grew thick with emotion. "If we accept assembly membership, my daughter will undergo the modifications. She still play violin. She still become a scientist or artist. But she'll be different, quieter, more obedient, less likely to question, to rebel, to push boundaries. She'll be safer, probably happier by conventional measures. But she won't be the person she was meant to be." The Prime Minister looked around the chamber. "Every one of us has someone we love, someone whose future we're deciding right now. When you vote, think of them. Think of who they are now and who they might become. Then decide if you want to change them forever." The vote was called. Each representative pressed their decision into the system. Green for accept, red for refuse. The tally appeared on screens worldwide. 8,372 representatives. 8,372 red votes. 0 green. Humanity. Had voted unanimously to refuse. The chamber exploded in cheers. In tears, in fear, in defiance. Sora let the reaction run its course, then raised her hand for silence. "We have made our choice," she said. "Now we must prepare for the consequences. Admiral Hyunwoo, you have full authority to mobilize our defensive capabilities. Ambassador Diane, please inform the Assembly of our decision. And to everyone watching around the world, we have chosen freedom over safety, independence over comfort. We chose to remain human, whatever that means, whatever it costs." Diane stood before the communication array, preparing to send the message that would change everything. Hannah stood beside him. "Are you ready?" she asked. "No," Diane admitted. "But we're doing it anyway." He activated the transmission. The message went out on all assembly frequencies, broadcast across the galaxy. "This is Ambassador Diane of Earth, speaking on behalf of humanity. After careful consideration, Earth has voted to refuse full membership in the Galactic Assembly. We appreciate the offer and mean no disrespect, but we cannot accept the terms of membership. We choose to remain independent." The response came within hours. Not from Kelleran or any diplomatic representative, but from the Assembly's High Council itself. Earth's refusal is acknowledged, but not accepted. No species has ever refused Assembly membership. No species has ever been permitted to refuse. Your biological and technological profile makes you too dangerous to remain outside Assembly control. You will accept modification and integration, or you will be pacified. Pacification fleet has been dispatched. Estimated arrival at your system: 3 days. Surrender immediately upon their arrival, and the process will be painless. Resistance will be met with appropriate force. This is your only warning. Sora addressed Earth one final time before the fleet arrived. They're coming. We knew they would. 3 days from now, we face the greatest threat humanity has ever known. We cannot match their numbers or their technology. By every logical calculation, we should surrender." She paused, looking directly into the cameras. "But humanity has never been very good at logic. We do stupid things. We fight unwinnable battles. We refuse to accept what everyone tells us is inevitable. Maybe that's a flaw. Or maybe it's exactly what we need right now. Admiral Hyunwoo has a plan. It's desperate and dangerous and probably won't work. But it gives us a chance, and that's more than the Assembly thinks we deserve. In 3 days, we find out if being human is enough. If stubbornness and creativity and refusal to bow down can match ships and weapons and 12,000 years of enforced peace." Sora smiled, and it was fierce and proud. "I want everyone to know. I'm not afraid. I'm angry. They came to our world offering friendship and partnership, but it was all a lie. They wanted to break us, to tame us, to turn us into another obedient species in their collection. Well, they're about to learn something important about humans. We don't break easily, and we really don't like being told what to do. Around the world, people prepared. Not just soldiers, but everyone. If Earth fell, it would fall together. If they survived, they would survive as themselves, unchanged and unmodified and defiantly human. 3 days until the fleet arrived. 3 days to prove that freedom was worth fighting for. The Assembly's pacification fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. 200 ships, each larger than anything humanity had ever built. They arranged themselves in perfect formation, blocking every approach to Earth. It was a show of overwhelming force, designed to break resistance before it could begin. On Earth's orbital command station, Taiyang watched them arrive. He had spent 3 days preparing for this moment, coordinating with military leaders across the planet, positioning humanity's defensive fleet in a careful pattern around Earth and Mars. "All ships report ready," his second officer reported. "We have 43 defensive platforms operational, 72 ships of various classes, and orbital weapons covering all major approach vectors. Against 200 assembly ships, it wasn't nearly enough." "Send the message," Taiyang ordered. The transmission went out to the assembly fleet. "This is Captain Taiyang of Earth Defense Command. You are entering our solar system uninvited and with hostile intent. Leave now, or we will defend ourselves." The response came immediately. "This is Fleet Commander Telvik of the Galactic Assembly Peacekeeping Force. Your resistance is futile. Power down your weapons, deactivate your defensive systems, and prepare for modification protocols. Any hostile action will be met with complete pacification of your species." Taiyang muted the channel and turned to his crew. "Remember the plan. We're not trying to win. We're trying to survive for 30 days. Stay defensive, use every trick we have, and buy Earth the time it needs." On Earth's surface, Nari worked in a facility that hadn't existed a week ago. The building was deep underground, shielded from sensors, hidden from satellites. Inside, 3,000 scientists worked around the clock on technologies the Assembly had forbidden. "How long do we have?" she asked her assistant. "The fleet is holding position. They're waiting to see if we surrender. Once they realize we won't, they'll attack. Maybe hours, maybe less. Then we work faster." Nari pulled up schematics for the weapon systems her team was developing. Advanced artificial intelligence to run targeting systems, processing millions of calculations per second. Genetic modifications that would let pilots react faster, think clearer under pressure. Quantum communication networks that couldn't be jammed. Self-replicating mining drones that could harvest asteroids for resources faster than any human. Crudot, all forbidden by Assembly law. All being built anyway. "We're breaking every rule they have," her assistant said nervously. "Good," Nari replied. "That's the point. They've spent 12,000 years making sure no species develops technology that could threaten them. Now they're going to find out what happens when someone does. In space, J1 monitored assembly communications from a stealth satellite. His job was intelligence, listening to enemy transmissions, finding weaknesses. What he was hearing confused him. "Captain," he reported to Taiyang, "the assembly fleet is confused. Their communications show they expected us to surrender as soon as they arrived. They've done this 26 times before, and resistance always collapses immediately. But we're not collapsing." "No, sir." "And they don't understand why. They keep running probability calculations, checking their data. By every metric they have, we should have given up already." Taiyang smiled grimly. "They've forgotten what it's like to face someone who won't quit. Tell me when they start moving." The assembly fleet waited for 6 hours, then sent another message. "Final warning. Surrender now, or face complete military action." Taiyang's response was simple. No. The fleet attacked. It started with long-range weapons, energy beams that could cut through ship hulls like paper. Earth's defensive platforms returned fire, using every weapon in humanity's arsenal. Nuclear missiles, railguns, laser arrays, kinetic impactors. The first platform died within 30 seconds, overwhelmed by focused fire. The second lasted a minute. The third managed to destroy an assembly ship before being obliterated. "Fall back to second defensive line," Taiyang ordered. "Activate the countermeasures." Humanity's ships retreated toward Earth, firing as they went. But they also deployed thousands of satellites, drones, and automated weapons platforms. Each one was small, easy to destroy, but there were so many of them. The assembly fleet had to waste time and ammunition dealing with each threat. "It's working," the tactical officer reported. "We're slowing them down." "Not enough," Taiyang said, watching the displays. "We're losing ships faster than they are. At this rate, we'll be gone in 12 hours. "Then we last 12 hours, his second officer said. "And we make them remember every minute." The battle raged through the solar system. Earth ships used tactics the assembly had never encountered. They hid in asteroid fields, using rocks as shields. They sacrificed damaged vessels in suicide runs to take out larger enemy ships. They changed formations constantly, never giving the assembly a stable target. It wasn't enough to win, but it was enough to survive. On Earth, Nari watched the battle on screens while her team worked. "How much longer?" she asked. 3 weeks minimum, her lead scientist replied. "We're working with technologies we barely understand. Every system needs testing, refinement, integration. We might not have 3 weeks. Then we'll work faster." Day 3 of the battle. Earth had lost half its defensive fleet. The assembly had lost 12 ships. It wasn't a fair trade, but it was better than anyone had expected. J1 intercepted a communication that made him smile. "Captain, the assembly is requesting reinforcements. They have 200 ships," Taiyang said. "Why do they need more?" "Because they expected this to be over in hours. Their tactics are designed for intimidation, not actual combat. They're used to enemies that surrender, not enemies that fight back." Taiyang studied the tactical display. The assembly fleet was being cautious now, not pressing their advantage. They were confused, uncertain. They've forgotten how to fight a real war. All they know is how to bully species that can't defend themselves. Can we use that? Maybe. Order all ships to implement harassment protocol Gamma. We're going to make them paranoid. Day 7. Earth's fleet was down to 20 ships, but the assembly had lost 30. More importantly, the assembly fleet was spread thin, constantly checking for threats, wasting resources on empty space because humanity had taught them to fear hidden weapons. Day 14. 10 Earth ships remained. The assembly had lost 50 vessels total. But the remaining assembly ships were adapting, learning, becoming more efficient. The next week would be critical. On Earth, Nari's team worked in shifts, never stopping. They were close. So close. The new AI systems were operational. The enhanced communication networks were online. The weapon systems were being tested. "We need more time," Nari told Sora during a secure call. "How much?" 2 weeks. "Maybe less if we skip some safety tests." "Skip them. We need these weapons now." Day 21. 5 Earth ships still fought. The assembly fleet was down to 140 vessels. They had called for reinforcements, but the nearest assembly response force was weeks away. Taiyang's ship had taken heavy damage. Half his crew was dead. His engines were failing, but they were still flying, still fighting. "Message from Earth," his communications officer reported. "Priority 1. Sora's face appeared on the screen. "Captain, you've done your job. You've given us the time we needed. Now it's our turn." "Ma'am?" "Stand by for coordinates. We're launching the new fleet. All ships fall back to Rally Point Alpha. The cavalry's coming." Taiyang allowed himself a moment of hope. "How many ships?" 30. But they're not like anything the assembly has seen before. On Earth, Nari stood in the launch facility, watching as 30 vessels powered up. They were smaller than the assembly ships, but faster, more maneuverable. Each one was controlled by an advanced AI that could process tactical data faster than any organic crew. Each one carried weapons that shouldn't exist, built with technologies the assembly had forbidden. "All systems green," her second reported. "Fleet is ready for launch." Nari opened a channel to the ship's AI systems. "You know your mission. Defend Earth. Destroy the enemy. Show them what happens when humans stop following rules." The AIs responded in perfect synchronization. "Understood." Initiating combat protocols. 30 ships launched into space, accelerating faster than any assembly vessel could match. They reached the battle zone in hours, not days. The assembly fleet detected them and prepared to engage. They had overwhelming numbers, superior experience, 12,000 years of military tradition, but they had never fought an enemy like this. An enemy that refused to give up. An enemy that broke every rule. An enemy that got stronger the longer the fight went on. The new fleet entered weapons range, and everything changed. The 30 ships moved like nothing the assembly had ever encountered. They didn't follow standard attack patterns or predictable formations. Each one operated independently, making thousands of calculations per second, adapting to enemy movements in real time. The first assembly ship died before its crew understood what was happening. A human vessel appeared from nowhere, moving at speeds that should have torn it apart, and fired weapons that cut through shields like they weren't there. The assembly ship exploded in a flash of light and debris. Then the second died. Then the third. "What are those things?" Fleet Commander Telvik demanded, watching his tactical display fill with alerts. "Unknown vessel type," his sensor officer reported. "They're using propulsion systems we've never seen. Their weapons operate on principles that violate assembly physics models. That's impossible. We have 12,000 years of research. We know what's possible. Apparently, we don't." The human ships spread through the battle zone like a swarm. They were smaller than assembly vessels, but impossibly fast. They dodged incoming fire, predicted enemy movements, struck from unexpected angles. Each one fought with the precision of a machine and the creativity of a human mind, because that's exactly what they were. AI, systems smart enough to think, fast enough to react, creative enough to improvise. Everything the assembly had forbidden because it was too dangerous. Now they understood why. Taeyan G watched from his damaged ship as the new fleet tore into the assembly formation. Tactical assessment, he ordered. Sir, the new ships are operating at 97% efficiency. They've destroyed 18 assembly vessels in the first 10 minutes with 0 losses. Current projections show complete enemy fleet destruction in 4 hours. Taiyang could hardly believe it. 4 hours? Against 140 ships? Yes, sir. The assembly vessels are designed for intimidation and peacekeeping against inferior forces. They've never faced an enemy that could match their technology, let alone exceed it. They don't know how to fight a real war. On Earth, Minho coordinated the battle from the command center. Screens showed ship positions, weapon status, damage reports. The data was overwhelming, coming in faster than any human could process. But the AI fleet didn't need humans to process it. They shared information instantly, coordinated perfectly, adapted constantly. They were learning from each engagement, becoming more efficient with every passing minute. The assembly is trying to retreat, Minho reported to Sora. Some ships are breaking formation, attempting to reach faster than light travel distance. Don't let them, Sora ordered. We need to send a message. No one who comes to destroy humanity leaves alive. The human ships pursued the fleeing assembly vessels. Some escaped, jumping to faster than light travel and running for assembly space. But most didn't make it. They were caught, surrounded, destroyed. 4 hours later, as predicted, it was over. Of the 200 assembly ships that had arrived, 193 were destroyed. 7 had escaped. Earth's original fleet of 72 ships was reduced to 5. But all 30 of the new vessels survived, barely damaged. The solar system fell silent. Debris from destroyed ships floated in space, a graveyard of the battle that had changed everything. Du Yun stood on the command station, looking at the aftermath. Hana joined him at the window. We won, she said quietly. We survived, Diane corrected. Winning comes next. What do you mean? Diane pulled up a star map, showing assembly space spreading across 4 spiral arms. The 7 ships that escaped are running home right now. Within days, every species in the assembly will know that humans fought a pacification fleet and won. They'll know it's possible to resist. You think other species will rebel? I think we just proved that the assembly can be beaten. That's a very dangerous idea. Dayun activated the communication array, setting it to broadcast on all assembly frequencies. This message would reach every member species, every colony, every outpost. This is Ambassador Doyun of Earth, speaking to the Galactic Assembly and all who can hear this transmission. 30 days ago, you sent a fleet to destroy us because we refused to submit. You told us resistance was futile. You told us we had no choice but to accept your control. You were wrong. We fought your fleet with ships built in weeks, using technologies you forbade us to develop. We fought with determination you forgot existed after 12,000 years of enforced peace. And we won. Not because we're stronger than you, but because we refused to accept that losing was inevitable. Dion paused, letting his words reach across the galaxy. For 12,000 years, you've told species they have no choice. You've modified their biology, restricted their technology, controlled their culture. You've built a cage and called it civilization. You've enforced compliance and called it peace. But the peace without freedom isn't peace. It's just surrender. To every species listening to this message, you have a choice. You always had a choice. The Assembly wants you to believe you're too weak to resist, too small to matter, too isolated to survive on your own. They want you to be afraid. But fear only works if you let it. Earth stands independent. We will not join the Assembly. We will not submit to modification. We will not follow protocols designed to keep us docile and obedient. And we invite any species that values freedom over safety to join us. The Assembly will call this rebellion. They'll say we're dangerous, reckless, threatening their carefully maintained order. They're right. We are dangerous. We're dangerous to any system built on control and coercion. We're threatening to the idea that peace requires surrender. But we're also offering something the Assembly never has: a real choice. Join us and be free. Stay with the Assembly and be safe. We won't force you. We won't modify you. We won't demand compliance. That's the difference between us and them. Diane ended the transmission and turned to find Sora standing behind him, watching. That was quite a speech, the Prime Minister said. It was the truth. Now we see what happens. What happened was chaos. Within hours, Assembly communication networks lit up with traffic. Species asking questions, demanding answers, requesting information about Earth's battle. The Assembly's official response was that Earth had used forbidden technology and would face severe consequences. But the species asking questions had seen the battle data. They knew Earth had faced overwhelming odds and won. The Assembly's claims of invincibility were shattered. Within a week, 3 species formally requested information about Earth's coalition of free worlds. Within a month, 12 species had declared independence from the Assembly. Within 3 months, that number had grown to 40-7. The Assembly responded with force, sending peacekeeping fleets to multiple systems. But now they faced enemies who knew resistance was possible. Species that had seen Earth fight and win. The Assembly won some battles, but others dragged on, costing ships and resources. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Assembly was at war. Real war, not simple pacification. And they weren't prepared for it. 3 years after Earth's refusal, Diane stood before representatives from 214 independent species. They met on a neutral station, away from both Earth and Assembly space. We didn't start this to build an empire, Diane told them. We just wanted to be left alone. But once we proved the Assembly could be resisted, we had a responsibility to help others who wanted freedom. An alien from a species called the Vortani spoke. The Assembly says you're leading us to disaster. That without their structure, their rules, their peacekeeping, we'll tear ourselves apart in war and chaos. Maybe we will, Diane admitted. Freedom is dangerous. Independence is hard. We'll make mistakes. We'll have conflicts. Some of us might even fight each other. But those will be our choices, our mistakes, our conflicts, not imposed on us by someone else. Another alien, from a species that had only recently broken free, asked, "What happens now?" The Assembly still has hundreds of species. They still have a massive fleet. They're learning to fight again. Now we prepare, Sora answered. She had traveled to the station to represent Earth's government. We build defenses. We share technology. We help each other stay independent. And we show the remaining Assembly species that freedom is worth the cost. And if the Assembly attacks again? Someone asked. Then we fight again, Minho said. And we keep fighting until they understand that some things can't be forced. Some species won't bow down. Some ideas can't be killed with ships and weapons. Nari added, we're also working on new technologies. Faster ships. Better weapons. Stronger defenses. The Assembly spent 12,000 years making sure no one could challenge them. We're going to spend the next few years proving that was a mistake. The meeting continued for days. Alliances were formed. Trade agreements signed. Defense pacts established. The coalition of free worlds wasn't as organized as the Assembly, wasn't as structured or efficient. But it was real. Species working together by choice, not compulsion. Back on Earth, Diane and Hana walked through a park in Seoul. It was spring, and the cherry blossoms were blooming. Life on Earth had returned to something like normal. though everyone knew it could shatter again if the assembly decided on full-scale war. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Pan asked.